Oh, there's so many yummy vegetarian options out there. You could try like lentil soup, veggie burgers, tofu stir fry. The possibilities are endless.
The biggest shifts in power, they don't happen with a big bang. No declaration of war, no huge public fight. Nah, they happen in the quiet, in the spaces between words. And that's the story we're getting into today. It's about a collapse that you can't even hear.
All right, so to really get what's going on here, you have to stop thinking about political power as just one person's influence. It's not that simple. It's more like a connected system, a whole ecosystem, really, that's built on personalities, on loyalty, all orbiting around a shared center of gravity. And at the very heart of this particular ecosystem, you've got three key players. But again, don't think of them as separate people. Think of them as nodes in a network. We're talking about Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, and Senator J.D. Vance. And for a while there, man, their orbits were locked in, perfectly and powerfully aligned. See, it was a system where each person's influence just fed the others. You had Trump's massive political base, right? Then you had Carlson's huge media platform. And then Vance, the rising political star. They all worked together like a well-oiled machine, creating this self-supporting bubble where personal loyalty was basically the only currency that mattered. But things change. Orbits decay. And lately, something started to shift. A subtle distance started to form inside this network that once seemed so solid. It was this slow, quiet pulling apart, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you were really, really paying attention. And that brings up a huge question, doesn't it? What actually happens when that gravitational pull holding these massive figures together starts to get weaker? What happens when loyalty isn't a sure thing anymore? And what's so fascinating is how you measure this change. It isn't loud at all. It's all about what's not there anymore. Those shared stages, they're gone, replaced by, well, a silent absence. All those public high fives and shows of support, now it's just this unspoken tension. That once unified voice has completely fractured into these separate, distant stories.
Okay, so every fracture has a starting point, right? A ground zero. And in this story, the thing that kicked it all off wasn't some big public fight or a shouting match. Nope. It was a departure, one that happened almost silently.
The person right at the center of this whole thing is Buckley Carlson. And what makes him so important isn't just his job, it's his name. Being Tucker Carlson's son, well, his actions carry a kind of weight, a legacy that goes way beyond your typical political aide.
So when he left J.D. Vance's team, it wasn't some big, dramatic resignation. It was just a decision, then an exit, and then just an absence. See, he didn't just quit a job. He quietly stepped away from a really critical junction in this entire power network. And in this world, that kind of absence, that becomes a political force all on its own. The real story here isn't that he left. It's the chain reaction it set off. It's a quiet little move that suddenly throws this whole web of inherited loyalties completely into question.
And yeah, that one quiet act, it sends these visible cracks rippling through the entire structure. It just goes to show you how fragile these alliances really are when they're built so much on personality. This really paints a picture of the new reality. You've got Tucker Carlson drifting further from Donald Trump, and then his son's departure. It's like a signal of a deep freeze in that whole relationship. And who's caught right in the middle? J.D. Vance. His bond with Trump is still strong, sure, but now it's under this immense, unspoken pressure.
This goes way beyond just politics. It's really a story about loyalty versus independence. When a son decides to create distance, man, that speaks volumes. It says so much about the burden of a legacy and the personal cost of trying to step out of your father's massive orbit.
So, the new reality of this whole fractured alliance? You could boil it down to a really simple, stark image. A connection that you just took for granted is now defined by a void. There were two chairs, and now one of them is empty. Which, of course, brings us to the aftermath. And honestly, the most telling part of this entire story isn't what anyone said. It's the uncomfortable, deafening quiet that came after this big shift. And that's because, in politics, silence can be so much more powerful than any argument. It makes everyone try to figure out what it means. It just builds this quiet tension that screams change is coming. And it might be change you can't undo. The fact that nobody made a big public statement, that's the statement.
Oh, there are so many yummy vegetarian options out there. You could try like lentil soup, veggie burgers, tofu stir fry. The possibilities are endless.
So where does that leave us? Well, with a pretty big question, I think. What happens when a network this powerful doesn't collapse in some big, messy public explosion, but just dissolves in silence? Because the fracture, it's already happened. And it didn't end with a bang. It ended with the lack of one.